Today, I'll be reacting to ESPN Analyst gets destroyed for disrespecting Larry Bird. So let's go right into the video.
Larry Bird is highly regarded as one of the 10 best players in NBA history. He was highly skilled, a great scorer, as well as a great passer. And when it came to his Celtics teams, he was highly valuable to their overall success. Now, with that being said, Larry Bird, like most older legends, is losing respect as time goes on. And when it comes to ESPN, I was absolutely floored to see a former NBA player insulting Larry Bird and saying point blank he is not one of the greatest shooters in NBA history.
And I think the NBA has gotten way past the balance and watching guys give up dunks to shoot threes on fast breaks. That kind of thing. I think that has hurt the game a lot. Now, that's me. I am old school, as we all know. JJ, perfect. But, Bird shot plenty of threes. And they had Parrish and McHale. Bird shot plenty of threes. The best. And Bird is one of the great shooters in the history of the sport. Not even close.
Bird shot threes. He never was a volume shooter from three.
No, I know that. But he was a great three-point shooter. He was not good. He was great.
So, stopping that clip right there, Redick, at the very end, had the facial expression of someone who was annoyed and disgusted by Larry Legend being called one of the best shooters of all time.
Now, to be fair of JJ Redick, I rock with JJ Redick. Now, Mad Dog, I agree with Mad Dog. Larry Bird is one of the greatest shooters in NBA history, and he was a great shooter. Now, technically, JJ Redick wasn't wrong. Larry Bird wasn't a volume three-point shooter, and that's just because the players back then didn't emphasize the three, and they didn't grow up with the three-point line. That's the only reason why. But Larry Bird was a great three-point shooter. So technically what JJ said wasn't wrong. He wasn't a volume three-point shooter. He technically wasn't wrong.
Bird shot plenty of threes. And they had Parrish and McHale. Bird shot plenty of threes. The best. And Bird is one of the great shooters in the history of the sport. Not even close.
Bird shot threes. He never was a volume shooter from three.
No, I know that. But he was a great three-point shooter. He was not good. He was great.
So, stopping that clip right there, Redick, at the very end, had the facial expression of someone who was annoyed and disgusted by Larry Legend being called one of the best shooters of all time. And for someone like Redick, it might be hard to understand that players in the past were also great players. But for him, he is so preoccupied with boosting up today's players, he downplays and disrespects past eras, like Bird, Cousy, as well as Jerry West. Now, getting on to the actual argument, Larry Bird, in his era, there was a three-point line that was introduced his first year. But for middle school, high school, even college, he had no three-point line.
That's what I just said. Like, the players in the NBA, they didn't emphasize the three-point line like that because they didn't grow up with it. So the only time they did practice the three-point shot was until they got to the NBA.
There was a three-point line that was introduced his first year. But for middle school, high school, even college, he had no three-point line. That is some very important context a lot of fans either don't know or try to ignore. And one more thing I do want to add, when Bird came into the NBA, he was actually a power forward who played primarily on the block. And despite that, in his first year in the NBA, he shot 40.6% for behind the arc. In terms of percentage, he ranked 3rd in the NBA, he was 5th in total threes, and 6th in threes attempted. As a rookie off the bat, Larry Bird was the best three-point shooter in 1980.
That is a great percentage. That's a great percentage. But how many did he attempt a game? Like 1 or 2? Now, like I said, I agree with Mad Dog. Larry Bird was a great three-point shooter. The man won the three-point contest 3 times. I think he won 3 straight years. I'm not denying Larry Bird a great shooter. He is a great shooter. I think everyone knows that. I'm just saying, in my opinion, I think JJ, he probably like comparing Larry Bird shooting to today. Because think about it. Players back in the day, they was attempting like 2 to 3 three-pointers a game. Now players shooting like 10 to 15 threes a game. So that's one aspect of looking at it. That's why he's told Mad Dog that Larry Bird was never a volume shooter. That's why. I think JJ think Larry Bird is a great shooter. I think he's just saying like, hey, Mad Dog, he didn't shoot that many threes. Maybe that's just me. I rock with JJ though. JJ is a very smart guy. In my opinion, I don't think JJ Redick would actually say Larry Bird isn't a great shooter.
Off the bat, Larry Bird was the best three-point shooter in 1980. And what makes it even more impressive, out of the qualifiers for three-point shooting, he was the only power forward to make the list, once again proving how much of a unicorn he really was.
Just to say, these clips he's showing are insane. These Larry Bird highlights are insane.
What makes it even more impressive, out of the qualifiers for three-point shooting, he was the only power forward to make the list, once again proving how much of a unicorn he really was.
He's one of the top 5 three-point shooters of all time. That's how good Bird is. Oh, yes.
We're not
three-point shooting contests. He was phenomenal. Bird's a great shooter.
Wait a minute, Doggy.
And Bird didn't shoot
Bird is
50
absolutely one of the
Doggy.
greatest shooters ever, but he's not one of the top 5 three-point, top 3, whatever
Did you see the three-point shooting that he put on, those clinics that he put on at the All-Star game?
Again,
did you watch?
Doggy, it's just math. It's attempts, it's makes, and it's percentage. And there's no way you could ever argue Larry Bird is a top 3 three-point shooter of all time. You can't make that argument.
You're basically...
I agree with JJ. See, I agree. He said Larry Bird is one of the greatest shooters ever, but he said he's not a top 3 shooter ever. I agree with that. I agree. I think Larry Bird top 5 now, but I don't think he's top 3 though. In my opinion, the top 3 greatest three-point shooters is Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Ray Allen. That's my opinion. Fourth, see, the fourth and that fifth spot, in my opinion, it's like 3 players that could go for that fourth and fifth spot. Like, one player got to be out. But in my opinion, if it's in any order, I'm not mad at it. But them 3 players is Dame, Reggie Miller, and Larry Bird. In my opinion, it might be Larry Bird, then Dame at 5th, or Dame 4th and Larry Bird 5th. I think Reggie Miller is 6th. But either way, Larry Bird is 4th or 5th. I don't think he's top 3, though. I don't think Larry Bird shoot better than Steph, Klay, and Ray Allen. If I go back a little bit, it did sound like he said Larry Bird is one of the best shooters ever, but he said there's no way he's a top 3. If I heard that correctly.
He's one of the greatest shooters ever, but he's not one of the top.
Let me go back. I think he said it right before that.
Oh, yes. Won three-point shooting contests. He was phenomenal. Bird's a great shooter.
Wait a minute, Doggy.
And Bird didn't shoot
Bird is
50.
absolutely one of the
Doggy.
greatest shooters ever, but he's not one of the top 5 three-point, top 3, whatever you just said.
Did you see the three-point shooting that he put on, those clinics that he put on at the All-Star game?
Again,
did you watch?
Doggy, it's just math. It's attempts, it's makes, and it's percentage. And there's no way you could ever argue Larry Bird is a top 3 three-point shooter of all time. You can't make that argument.
You're basing it on math. You're basing it on math and the time of when he played. I'm basing it on just shooting.
Now, looking at
JJ ain't wrong. Honestly, Mad Dog and JJ, both of them said Larry Bird is a great shooter. It's just how great of a shooter they just discussing. Mad Dog think Larry Bird up here. JJ, he said Larry Bird is one of the greatest shooters ever. He just don't think he's that high. And I agree. He's not top 3. But he's top 5 for sure. I disagree with JJ on that point. I think Larry Bird top 5. Because I don't know 5 players that shoot better than Larry Bird. But JJ, he's a numbers guy. Because if you're looking at makes, attempts, well, the amount of attempts in the percentage, it is a big disparity between like the players after Larry Bird and how Larry Bird shot in his day. But like I said, with the context, the three-point line didn't come in until Larry Bird first year in the league. So he didn't grow up with a three-point line. Both of them is not wrong. Both of them not technically wrong. Like JJ said it, Larry Bird is one of the greatest shooters ever. He's just not top 3. And I agree with that. He's top 5 though. He's most definitely top 5.
Math and the time of when he played. I'm basing it on just shooting.
Now, looking at JJ in this clip, he once again provides no context, saying, quote, "It's about makes, attempts, and percentage." Looking at the raw numbers with no context, no data, and no additional information. That argument right there, going on stats alone, is highly disingenuous. For example, look at the mid and early 2000s. Back in that era, averaging 30 points was extremely difficult for people like Kobe, Allen Iverson, and even T-Mac. Being knowledgeable NBA fans, we know that era had a much slower pace, the paint was more crowded, and scoring was definitely more difficult. When looking at the raw stats with no context, players in today's league averaging 30 were more efficient compared to Kobe, as well as Iverson. And like Reddick said, it's makes, attempts, and percentage. Someone like SGA, off the pure raw stats, was a better scorer than peak Iverson. And someone like Tatum, technically, was more impressive than the early 2000s Kobe.
I mean, yeah, with no context, if you look at straight up at stats, a lot of people would probably think SGA is a better scorer than Iverson. By the way, I don't think SGA is a better scorer than Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson is one of the greatest scorers ever. And like this image right here, there's no way Jason Tatum is a better scorer than Kobe Bryant. Like, no way. But like you said, in early 2000s, slower pace. It was hard to score. paint was crowded. You got to add context. Now, me, I don't think Larry Bird is top three-point shooter. I'm not going off the numbers. I'm just going off with my eyes. Like the videos I saw with Larry Bird compared to the other players. I feel like with JJ, when he talking about the makes, the attempts, and the percentages, I don't agree with that aspect because you do need to add context to that because it's different eras. But he did say Larry Bird was one of the greatest shooters ever. He wasn't completely wrong, but he wasn't completely right either. JJ Redick, he probably think Larry Bird's a top 10 shooter ever, but he don't think he's top 3 or top 5. I think he's top 5. But yeah, he definitely need to add context though, because JJ, he is a big numbers guy. If you try to argue with JJ Redick with numbers, you lost. JJ Redick is like the numbers expert. This guy averaged just per 32, per 48, per 100 possessions. Like the PER, the true shooting. I'm sorry. If I try to debate JJ with those numbers, I'm losing every time. I'm losing every time. Unless I had like a math whiz squad, I might have a chance.
As was Iverson. And like Redick said, it's makes, attempts, and percentage. Someone like SGA, off the pure raw stats, was a better scorer than peak Iverson. And someone like Tatum, technically, was more impressive than the early 2000s Kobe. My overall point being, stats like usual require context. The same thing goes to Larry Bird and his shooting percentage. And speaking of that percentage, looking at Bird, after 1984, when he stopped playing power forward, his overall shooting splits were highly impressive, shooting 50% from the field, 39.8% from 3, and 90% from the line. During that time period, 5 different times he shot above 40% from 3, and his highest season was at 42.7%. And going year by year, in 85, he was 4th in 3-point makes, 86, he was 1st, 87, also 1st, and 88, he was 4th.
Yeah, Larry Bird, he was a very great shooter. Yeah, Larry Bird, he was a great shooter, no doubt.
And his highest season was at 42.7%. And going year by year, in 85, he was 4th in 3-point makes, 86, he was 1st, 87, also 1st, and 88, he was 4th. For peak Larry Bird, from 85 to 88, he was 1st in threes made, 1st in threes attempted, and 4th in 3-point percentage. For his overall era, in terms of volume and percentage, he was the Steph Curry of the late 1980s.
I agree with everything this guy is saying about Larry Bird and his era. I completely agree with everything.
85 to 88, he was 1st in threes made, 1st in threes attempted, and 4th in 3-point percentage. For his overall era, in terms of volume and percentage, he was the Steph Curry of the late 1980s.
Bird is an unbelievable.
Again, we had this discussion the other day. About James Naismith. James Naismith invented the game. You were rewarded for putting the ball in the basket. There's plenty of people that have shot more, made more, and guess what? Made more at a higher percentage than Larry Bird from 3. I'm not saying Larry Bird is not one of the greatest shooters ever. He's not one of the greatest 3-point shooters ever.
Yes,
you cannot make that argument.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Because the 80s is so much.
Okay, now, JJ, you're my guy. I can't defend you on that. Larry Bird is definitely one of the greatest 3-point shooters ever. So to make this clear, if I heard it right, JJ Redick said Larry Bird is one of the greatest shooters ever, but he's not one of the greatest 3-point shooters ever. And I'm thinking he's going strictly based off the numbers. I think Mad Dog was going off more from the eye test. And I'm more on Mad Dog side. Yes, I look at stats and everything. But if you look at the eye test, Larry Bird was a great shooter. He's definitely, in my opinion, like I said, he's a top 5 shooter in NBA history. I can't name 5 or 10 players that shoot better than Larry Bird. Now, if he's going off players like strictly off the numbers, that means the best shooters in NBA history gotta be players from this era. Or mid 2010s to now. If you're going off that, it's Steph Curry, Clay, like Dame, James Harden, KD, like players like that, because they shot more threes and they probably shot at a higher percentage. Wait, hold up. I was just thinking about it with the names because, like I said, I think Steph, Clay, and Ray Allen shoot better than Larry Bird. I said it's a debate with Larry Bird and Dame. Before, I just forgot about KD. I just completely forgot about KD. Ooh, do Larry Bird shoot better than KD? Ooh. Oh, man. I agree with the narrator said. Larry Bird in his era was Steph and Curry. Curry. But do Larry Bird shoot better than KD though? I don't know. KD do got a nice jump shot though. That's a tough one. Hey, drop it in the comments below. Do y'all think Larry Bird shoot better than KD? Cause I'm not gonna lie, he might be out the top 5 after that. I'm not even gonna lie, he might be out the top 5. That's definitely a debate. We'll come back to that one. I don't know. I'm just gonna leave Larry Bird in my top 5. But if you think Dame and KD shoot better than him, I'm not mad at you. But that's a tough one. Who's a better shooter between Larry Bird and KD? That's a tough one.
The game, you were rewarded for putting the ball in the basket. There's plenty of people that have shot more, made more, and guess what? Made more at a higher percentage than Larry Bird from 3. I'm not saying Larry Bird is not one of the greatest shooters ever. He's not one of the greatest three-point shooters ever. You cannot make that argument.
Yes, I'm sorry. Because the 80s is so much different. There's physicality, the way they guarded people. You couldn't. Can we get
Doug, I've been trying to make a point.
Seriously,
I've been trying to make a point for you, Doug.
So once again, Reddick has zero historical context and wants to make basketball black and white and about percentage and stats. And looking at Larry Bird, like I said before, he was one of the pioneers of the high-volume three-point shooters from day one in the NBA. And for a big man, he was especially unique in his time because most forwards didn't dare step out to shoot threes. And Bird's overall influence, much like Steph Curry, had a big effect on the game going forward, for guys like Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Durant, and even Jason Tatum. And one thing I do want to nail home, in 1980, three-point shooting was a gimmick and a joke for most coaches. But for Larry Bird, in a 5-year period, he legitimized it while shooting upwards of 40%, really not knowing what he was doing for his time. And like I said before, peak Larry Bird was an elite and all-time great three-point shooter. As from 85 to 88, he shot 41.4% from behind the arc, when the league average was 29.5%. Once again showing Bird was light years ahead of the curve and is a unicorn for his time period given his size, volume, as well as percentage. And one more thing I do want to reiterate is stats with zero context. As any average Joe off the street can look at a box score, look at a percentage, and read it and tell if it's good or bad. But a real smart NBA fan, what they do, they look at the context, the peak, and the overall era. As looking at raw stats as a simpleton, someone like Kobe and his career stats aren't as impressive as Damian Lillard when it comes to scoring. As Dame compared to Kobe, averages more points, a higher true shooting percentage, higher three percentage, and higher free throw percentage. Would anyone in their right mind say Dame Lillard was a better overall scorer than Kobe?
Now that's actually funny. That was actually funny. No one is saying Dame is a better scorer than Kobe. Now don't get me wrong. Damian Lillard, he top 75, one of the greatest players, one of the greatest shooters ever in NBA history. Don't get me wrong. Damian Lillard is a dog. Dame is an absolute dog. No disrespect towards Damian Lillard. But better than Kobe Bryant as a scorer? No. I'm sorry. No, he's not.
Percentage and higher free throw percentage. Would anyone in their right mind say Dame Lillard was a better overall scorer than Kobe? Because looking at the numbers, remember, makes, attempts, and percentage, Dame Lillard, in fact, was a better scorer. And once again, looking at Bird, at his absolute peak in the playoffs, he was phenomenal. As in 86, he averaged 25.9 points, 9.3 boards, 8.2 assists on 52, 41, and 93 splits. For NBA history, Larry Bird was the first player ever to have a high-volume 50, 40, 90 postseason run. And since Bird, only KD and Kawhi have joined him on that list.
Let's say Steph Curry, for example.
Right.
When I watch Steph Curry off the ball in a playoff game,
he's great.
getting grabbed and held by Marcus Smart, they're attached to him at all times.
Right.
Then when I watch Larry Bird come off a pin down and no one's within 5 feet of him and they're shooting the gap, you're telling me one is more physical than the other? You're telling me that's more physical than Steph Curry being grabbed and held for 48 minutes?
Okay. JJ, now, in my opinion, the 80s was definitely way more physical than today's game. I will have to admit though, because I did a reaction to Larry Bird highlights, a lot of the times that brother was wide open though. To be fair on JJ point though, because a lot of the highlights I looked at from Larry Bird and reacted to, he was flat out wide open though. I do give JJ on that point, but come on JJ. The 80s for sure was grabbing, pushing, pulling, kicking, slapping, elbowing, like they was doing everything under the sun. Now, I'm not going to act like today's game is more physical than the 80s. It's not. Now, they do be grabbing, pushing, and all that and pulling Steph Curry. I would too. It's Steph Curry. If that man got an inch of space, he's making the shot. A little bit on JJ's side, though. When you see a lot of Larry Bird jump shots, though, he was flat out wide open, though.
Within 5 feet of him and they're shooting the gap. You're telling me one is more physical than the other? You're telling me that's more physical than Steph Curry being grabbed and held for 48 minutes?
Now, stopping Redick right there, when talking about any era of basketball, there are always good defensive teams and bad defensive teams. But for Redick, when it comes to Bird's era, he only focuses in on the bad defense, compared to Steph's era, where he totally ignores the bad defense and the awful teams like Houston, Charlotte, and San Antonio. And as a basketball fan on YouTube, it takes about 5 minutes to find Larry Bird playing against very physical defense who grabs him, holds him, double teams him, and does all types of things to limit his shots and his shooting space.
Okay, that's probably what the highlights I saw, because I did react to Larry Bird, especially like the longer version, his 1985-86 season. Yeah, 85-86. That's when they won the championships, and that was one of the greatest like Celtics teams ever. I agree, in the 80s, they was smacking, pushing, pulling, whatever, right? A lot of jumpers, though, Larry Bird was open, but that probably was against the bad teams, though. Because I also did a video reacting to Larry Bird. It was from Thinking Basketball. It was talking about how Larry Bird against the bad teams, he was lighting them up. But against the very good defensive teams, he didn't shoot a horrible percentage, but he definitely shot worse.
Bird playing against very physical defense who grabs him, holds him, double teams him, and does all types of things to limit his shots and his shooting space. And when speaking of the 80s, when it came to Pistons, they had Dennis Rodman, Joe Dumars. The Lakers had Cooper and Worthy. Philadelphia had Bobby Jones and Caldwell Jones. Players like Allen Robinson, Larry Nance, Sidney Moncrief, Buck Williams. You had great defenders on all-time great defensive teams. And just like Redick, I could cherry pick bad plays here, bad plays there, from any era. At the end of the day, it makes no sense doing that. You have to watch the film, understand the era, and provide context to what you're watching. Yes, back in the day, they played very close and compact to the basket. That's because back then, they didn't know the value of three-point shooting. But someone like Bird was a pioneer and an innovator of three-point shots for big men and just players in general. And one last thing I do want to throw in there, looking at Larry Bird, Mad Dog Russo brought up the NBA Finals. For Bird in the Finals, for his career, in 5 trips collectively, he shot 42.2% from behind the arc. And when it came to clutch time play, in the final 5 minutes, shot a staggering 42.8%. If you look at three-point shooting for Larry Bird, at the biggest times when the stakes were highest, he elevated his game and rose to the occasion. And like Pat Riley said, Larry Legend is the guy you want taking the shot when the clock's winding down. So that right there is my last overall point. And when it comes to Bird, I personally think he's a top 10 shooter of all time. If you want to say top 5, I definitely wouldn't push back too heavily given his era and how good he was for his time period.
Because I was saying he was top 5, but I totally forgot about KD. I totally forgot about KD. So he might be top 10. He might be top 10, especially like players like KD, Dame, Steph, Clay. You know, players like Ray Allen, Reggie Miller. So he might be top 10. I might have to go back on that top 5. But yeah, he's most definitely a top 10 shooter ever.
Right there is my last overall point. And when it comes to Bird, I personally think he's a top 10 shooter of all time.
Oh, wait, I also forgot Devin Booker, too. Oh, my goodness, wait. Oh, yeah, I forgot some people for sure. I for sure forgot some people. I also forgot Kyle Korver. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Larry Bird might be top 10 for sure. I forgot a lot of people.
And when it comes to Bird, I personally think he's a top 10 shooter of all time. If you want to say top 5, I definitely wouldn't push back too heavily given his era on how good he was for his time period. And for Redick, as you guys know, I am not a big fan of him or his takes regarding past legends. As always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.
Shout out to Uncut Hoops. That was a great video regarding JJ Redick thoughts about Larry Bird. Yeah, I'll just stick with Larry Bird being a top 10 three-point shooter ever. We're just going to stick with that. We're just going to stick with that for right now. So comment down below y'all thoughts about this video, your thoughts about Larry Bird, your thoughts about JJ Redick and Mad Dog takes. Do you think Larry Bird is a top 3 three-point shooter ever? Do you think he's top 5? Do you think he's top 10? Do you think he's just out the top 10 in general? I'm just curious to see what you all think. Furthermore, like and subscribe. Also hit that notification bell so you would never miss a video from me. And I hope everyone have a blessed day. I'm out.